Hi everyone, this is Panos from Hack the Box and welcome to the University CTF of 2022. I'm here to do a workshop with you and it's going to be focused on cloud hacking. Last year we had a lot of skilled players and it seemed that a lot of them had problems with cloud challenges. So we're going to show one that it was used in last year's finals and see how we can use the same techniques that we use, for example, in cloud challenges or just regular machines to solve a cloud challenge. So without wasting any more time, let's begin with the least interesting part. It's about me. Who am I? So my name is Panos. I studied computer science. I had my bachelor's and my master's degree from the Athens University of Economics and Business. I was a CTF player for a while. Me and my team were from the first players that joined Hack the Box back in 2017, I think it was. And I was a penetration tester for almost 4 years, and I had really fun doing it. So this is going to be focused on the Amazon Cloud, or which is called AWS, the Amazon Web Services. So we're going to start with what is commonly used, and you can hear this a lot about the S3. So S3 comes from Simple Storage Service. What essentially is, it is a cloud storage service, and it's used by a large number of companies. And you may hear a lot of stories saying that data leakage came as a result of usage of S3 buckets, but this is not the case. The case is the misconfiguration that was happened. So let's start with some basic terminology. So the most common term you hear is S3 bucket, and what it is it is essentially a folder, a file system, and inside there are objects, which objects are the names of the files essentially. So you can think of it as the bucket is a folder and contains files which are called objects. And you may also hear the term keys used quite often, but we will have a look at this in the next slide. So let's see how access control is being done in the Amazon Web Services. There is this thing that is called Identity and Access Management, or IAM. And in this, the different permissions are assigned to different entities. AWS only acknowledges 3 entities, which are users. Users can be a person or it can be a service. There are groups, which is collections of users. And there are roles. Roles can be assumed by a user, they can be revoked, they can be temporary, and they are used to give the associated permissions to the user. All of these are written in files that are called policies. So let me hide myself. And there is also the access key ID and the secret access key, excuse me. So what it is, you can think of it as a username and a password, while they are not that. So there are 3 ways that you can connect to the Amazon Web Services. The first one is through a web portal, a web login. And the 2 others are either you can add these keys in your code. For example, if you want a script to access the contents of an S3 bucket, and this is usually when you find the leaks, that code gets leaked and inside it there are the keys. And the other way is you can use the AWS CLI, which stands for Command Line Interface, and is a tool by Amazon itself to access the AWS. Also, there is a magic IP. That IP is 169.254.169.254. It is part of a private IP range. I'm sure most of you are familiar with private IP ranges like 10.0.0.0, like most HTTP machines. And they cannot be used by the internet. It is supposed to be unreachable by routers, and it should be reachable only from the host machine, and it is, unless somebody tries to expose it by proxy, which is something that you should not do. So what runs there? It's the Instance Metadata Service, or IMDS, and it's used to retrieve user data and metadata of the specific instance that it's running on that machine. So for this, let's try to use what we learned on last year's challenge. Let's switch to my VM. Here we go. I launched the Docker and I got an IP, and I did a simple nmap scan on it. So what we see now, we see two ports, port 8000 and port 9000. We can try to do CURL or CURL to see the contents of this. Let's try. Let's try with 8000 first. And what we see is that it has local stack running. Okay, so better try the other one. We can see from the nmap that it is an Apache HTTPD. It also has a title, Pierce Shopping. So if you try to add it in your browser, this is what it comes up. If you try to click any of these, you can see that there are not much things in place. So probably we have to find another way. And I proxied this. And right off the bat, we can see by the response headers some very interesting stuff. We have three headers. The first one is this one. It says expired by Hystrix. So what Hystrix is a software. Essentially, it's a library that is used for monitoring the latency and fault tolerance in remote systems. We can try to use the very common methodology of typing the software to find if there are any interesting CVEs, vulnerabilities, that exist in it, I'm sorry. And we also have two more headers, XAMZ ID and XAMZ request. Both of these are very common headers that are used in Amazon and AWS, so we know that this is an AWS that is running. And we can try to find some vulnerabilities in Hystrix just by Googling. And right off the bat, we can find this one, which this is the main part of it. So certain versions of the programs allow the use of a certain endpoint called the proxy stream endpoint to make requests to any server, reachable by the server that is hosting the dashboard. So if you remember what we said minutes ago, we can try to see if this vulnerability works, first of all. And after that, we can try to use this to access the IMDS service. But first of all, let's see if the vulnerability works. So let's make a new directory. We'll call it workshop. And we will need an index file, so I will just create a sample index file. Index.html. And we are going to run a Python server, an HTTP server. And we're gonna need to do it as a super user. I forgot. So let's see if the vulnerability exists. So URL. I'm going to need the IP because I do not remember it. So there it is. So we're gonna hit the proxy stream endpoint. and we're going to specify an origin, and we're going to do this by providing our own IP, which first of all we have to find. Okay, 10.10.14.3, I think was it. Let's see. And we get back the index file that we created. That's nice. So that means that the vulnerability exists. If this was a real case, you may have to try a number of vulnerabilities to see what works, but I do this in hindsight. So now it's time to see if we can use the same vulnerability to access the magic IP that we said before, the IMDS. So instead of this, we're gonna add 169.254, 169.254, please to remember. Anyway, and we see that it works. So that's nice. We will drop it. And we're gonna use this to extract user info. So one of the endpoints of this service that we can use to extract info is this one. It's called latest metadata IAM, the access management, and info. So it works. We see some information, and let's see if we can do this to get the credentials of the role that this application runs as. So we're going to do the same thing, but this time it's going to be IAM security credentials. You can Google to find all of the endpoints of this specific service. I have them noted down, but by Googling you can find all of them, and it's S3-root. So right now it is very nice because we have all we need to connect to the web service. So what we have is the access key ID, we have the secret access key, and we have the session token. So let's try to use them. For this, we're going to use the AWS CLI. You can find the AWS CLI by Amazon itself, and it's on their website. And if you don't have it installed, you can just copy these commands, run it on a terminal, and you will have it. So once you do, we're going to do AWS configure to give them the IDs and the keys. So you see this part here because I already did it one time. I already solved this challenge before doing this workshop. But let's pretend I haven't. So you add this. You also add the secret access key. And I'm going to leave the rest blank. And right now I have to access also, not access, I'm sorry, to configure the session token. So let's do this. Set AWS session token. And we're going to copy and put all of this in quotation marks. Let's see if I typed everything correctly. I did, I didn't expect it, nice. So we can try to find we can use this immediately to connect. And we can use this to try to find what kind of buckets we have access to. In order to do this, the syntax of the command is AWS S3 LX is the command. You have to provide the endpoint URL. Which is 10, 129, 136, 92. And you're going to do this on the local stack instance. And I forgot to add the HTTP at the beginning. Let's see if it works. It does. And it seems that we have access to two different buckets. The first one is called assets, and the second one is called private. For sure, the folder called, the bucket called private seems more interesting. So let's try to get the contents, to see the contents of this folder. And we have to add the name of the folder after the command, after ls. It's private dash 02 01 2022. And I think that's it. And it does, and it contains the flag.txt. So in order to get the flag, we have to copy from this bucket to our machine. It's just a standard command. So in order to do this, we have to type it. This is S3. The command is cp. You have to specify the bucket. That is an S3. .02 01 2022. And you have to specify the file as well, or the object. And you have to specify where you want it to be saved. We want it to be saved in the folder that we are running right now, the terminal. And you have to specify the endpoint URL one more time, which is 10, 129, 136, 92, 8,000. And it is not this. Why? Let's see what typo did we make in this. Of course. And it downloaded. If we do an ls, we can see the flag. And that was the challenge. So the main purpose of showing this challenge is that in order for somebody to solve it, they had to do a standard web hacking procedure at the start, like seeing the headers, identifying the software, searching for vulnerabilities in it, and then doing some research on the service that it's running. It doesn't matter that it's called the cloud service. Just by watching YouTube videos, you can find a lot of info from what I said of the services. They are widely used. And let's have a look at what we learned from this. So the first is like, no need to panic. You can try to do this. You can solve this. Maybe you can solve some of the challenges, but you have to put yourself to the test. And the techniques that we use in hacking are familiar, and they work on different scenarios. Before going into something, it's very nice to research it and try to find the way that it works, in order to find the way that it doesn't work, in order for you to hack it. And from what we saw is that an application is as secure as the least secure component. So as you see, the main problem of this application was not the S3 bucket, but it was the histories that allowed access to the AMDS panel. So when somebody's making systems, it's very useful to have this in mind and to treat each specific of a web application or a network with care. And that was it. I hope you had fun, and I hope you will solve some cloud challenges this CTF. Goodbye.